Hello and welcome to my channel, Haylee Marie Vintage. Today I'm really excited. We are moving into spooky season. It is October for you. It is August for me. But I wanted to finally move into some kind of spooky sewing. Last year I did 6 weeks of spooky sewing. That is a no. This week you're getting 2 Halloween type projects from me. This first one here is going to be a very practical, and then the second one will be very ball gowny. So let me show you what we're looking at for today. Here I have this 1979 culottes pattern, which is like a culotte overall pattern that I think will be super cute. And for the fabric, you will have seen me haul this recent. The main fabric is going to be this beautiful black cat fabric that I think is super cute and fun. And then the bib and possibly the straps, I have to kind of decide what I'm doing with that, but the little triangle will be this black like velvety fabric. So that is the plan for this project. This should be a pretty simple project. An overall usually takes me about a day to make, so I'm hoping to do this in one day. So I'm planning on doing my cutting on Friday evening and then have an all-day sew day on Saturday. Usually these require very little hand sewing, but also I'm excited, even though it is still very summer for me. I'm excited to have these for the months going up to October. I'm excited to have them for September, and I'm excited. I love making overalls, and this is basically a pair of short overalls. So I'm excited to take you along with me for this journey, and we will just go ahead and hop into the cutting. I feel like most people like it when their patterns come factory folded. It actually makes me quite bitter because I have to spend a while cutting out the actual pattern. One of the things I love about vintage patterns is you usually don't have to cut them out. So I was not necessarily most pleased, but I tried to make it an enjoyable task in the morning and watch some TV and all that stuff. But I am glad it was not too many pieces. And with those cut out, it's time for me to cut out the pattern. I am adding about like 3/8 of an inch to the sides to just add about an inch and a little bit around the whole outfit. I think I added about 1.5 inches with that measurement. And this just will make it fit my waist with a little bit more relaxing in it. So it's just a little bit less snug. And as always, here during the cutting out of fabric, I'm going to remind you that I have a Ko-Fi where you can go over and buy me a coffee to help support this channel. I always really appreciate it, as I put a lot of time, labor, and supplies into it. Spooky did eventually arrive to oversee my cutting and make sure I'm cutting the cats the correct way, as they are her kin. This pattern also called for some interfacing, just of the facing pieces, so I'm cutting that out. And last thing I need to cut out is the stripy fabric. I almost forgot. This is the contrast fabric that is going to be in the yoke. Now it is time for me to start sewing things together. I'm going to stay really true to the instructions on this pattern. So here they first have you joining the front fly seam, and then for the seam finishing on these, I would really like them to be essentially a full felted. I don't actually need the strength of a felted seam, but I thought it would be nice if it looked like a felted seam. So I am chopping down the seam allowance of one side by like half and then folding over the other side, and eventually I'll fold it all the way over and it'll just enclose the seams really nicely. And then I will top stitch those down. Next up is the pockets. I'm actually pretty excited. I don't think I've ever done pockets like this before, so it'll be a new skill. Here they have you just line up the like inner pocket bag with the outer, and this will create kind of like a facing effect like it would on a neckline. And then after sewing that, I am clipping the curve before I will then iron it, so that way all my seams are enclosed. Before then, stitching about 3/8 away from the edges to keep these nice. This is why you don't see me understitching, is because I am reinforcing these with like an all the way through stitching or top stitching. I don't feel a need to understitch to get that nice look, because I can press it instead really precisely, and since I'm sewing that press essentially in place, I know it'll stay forever. The next step here is to pin the pocket to, I guess, what's basically a pocket lining. And then after sewing those together with a straight stitch, I'm going around with a zigzag stitch to finish the edges. This has become my preferred way to finish pocket seams, just because I think it's a little bit more durable than pinking. And then the instructions tell me to baste all those layers. I think this makes sense since there's essentially 3 layers around here, and I assume you want to baste them down so they don't float or do anything weird when you actually go to sew your pieces together later. The next step is to put the gathering stitches in on the bodice front, as well as stay stitch the V that's in the front where the like two curves of the bodice meet together. And then I am pinning the bodice to the waist of the front that I just constructed. You can see all the pockets and everything. And after sewing these together, I'm again preparing the seams to do that faux felted look. Continuing to follow the instructions, which do definitely do the unit by unit assembly, I am marking the darts on the back. It makes sense that the back has darts since it has to fit my butt. That is why they're there, not in the front. Here I'm sewing up the back of the pants, stopping where the dot tells me, which is where the zipper will begin. I'm going to go ahead and finish the seams for the zipper with a zigzag stitch. I have been really lax about finishing the fabric around my zippers, and I think it's time that I think about it and stop leaving really messy zippers. And it was right about here that I remembered I was supposed to put some interfacing in to both the bodice front, which I've done, and then also into the bodice back. This interfacing is going to be all along kind of, I guess you could call it like the neckline or the top line or whatever, the top of the bodice essentially. And here I am now attaching those bodice pieces that I did the zigzag stitching on for the zipper to the pants of the jumpsuit. And then with the bodice and pants attached, I am also going to baste down where the zipper will go, so that way I can press it really nicely and overall prep my zip. And then after basting those together, I'm pinning in my zipper. I decided I wanted to actually try a proper like back seam zipper that has even bits on both sides instead of a placket. I'm feeling brave today, so I thought I would do it, and this is overall an easy project, so a good time to try something I find more challenging. And then I'm sewing down and around, and everything went really well, and I'm very proud of myself because this is a zipper skill I have struggled with a lot in the past. So now I am ripping the stitches open on the zipper, and that gives me a perfect zipper, and I'm so proud. And now I am attaching the inseams together. I decided to do these first. They have you do this and the side seam simultaneously, but I thought if I did the inseam first, I could get a better flat felted seam there than if I did them both at the same time. And then with the inner seam done, I am now sewing down those side seams, and Spooky is of course going to come for a visit, and I love her so much, and she's very distracting, and I guess we're going to match because I'm going to have black cats on my outfit, so I should definitely give her a little bit of love. And then to finish those seams, I am of course doing my fake felted method where I'm cutting that away and ironing and all that jazz. And with the legs join, I tried this on just to get an idea of where it hit. I liked where it hit, so I just did a double fold hem. Spooky came by again to check on me, and I ended up pestering her to try to get her to attack me on the sewing machine, I guess. I don't know why I did this. It was a bad choice. And now it's time for the facings. I am sewing the front and back facings together here. And then after cleaning up the seams on these by just doing a quick fold over, I am then putting in my label. I'm trying to be a lot better about putting in my labels because I do want my name on things that I've made. And now it's time for me to pin my facings to the outside of the overalls. And then much like the pockets, I'm not going to understitch because I will be stitching over these, which is what I'm doing here. I will note I just did one line 3/8 of an inch away from the actual seam line. The instructions had you do it right next to the edge and then a 1/4 inch from that, but I felt like this would match the fake felt seams I did, so that is why I chose to do it this way. And then here's where I did something wrong and then refused to go back and fix it. I should have sewn the backside onto this, so sewed them essentially wrong side to right side because this will then have another side, which you'll see in a second, but I instead did right sides together because my brain goes like right sides together automatically. It resulted in a little bit of a funky V at the bottom, but I am nothing if not stubborn, so even though I realized this mistake, I kept on going. Right now is when I need to work on the straps, so that way they can be sewn into that upper facing. And after sewing them, I'm turning them. I think one of the really funny things about my sewing journey is this is a task I used to hate, but now I kind of find it relaxing and fun, and I could get a better tool and do it easier, but I kind of like doing it this way, even though I guess it's annoying, but I kind of like it now. I don't know why. And then here I am again sewing around 3/8 of an inch around the strap. And then I'm pinning those in place with the top before I will then make, I guess, a little strap sandwich by taking then what's now the facing piece, which should have been the outside piece if I had not been stubborn, and I am going to pin that and it'll make a little sandwich. After sewing all that down, I'm now working on ironing this really well because I am then again going around this with that 3/8 inch seam allowance. And now it's time for the tiny bit of hand sewing these use. These are actually a good project for, I think, days where my hands are hurting because I take almost no hand sewing. I'm just sewing the facings down here before then sewing on the button, before then using my buttonhole foot to sew the buttonhole. After I finish up these buttonholes, I'm then going to put on some fray check, and then I will let that fray check dry before then using a seam ripper to open up the buttonhole. And with all that done, I am ready for the reveal, and I can't wait to show you these very fun culotte overalls. Alright, you have seen the reveal. I hope you enjoyed. The owner of the house came out while I was filming, so that's always my favorite, very awkward. He was pretty chill, so it was fine. But we have wrapped this project up. This was so speedy and nice. We're gonna proceed with our project cost breakdown. I was sitting on my spreadsheet. The cat fabric for these culottes was $60. If I can still find it on Josephine's, I'll link it down below. The striped velvet fabric I picked up in Portland, and I only got a half yard, and it was $7.50. So my fabric total is $67.50. The notions were really cheap because I just used one thing of thread, one zipper, and 2 buttons. That was all this needed. That was $4.13. And then the pattern for this was on the more expensive side, but I knew it would be super useful for me, and now that I've made these, I'm gonna make this pattern a ton. So for first use, since I've only used it one time, it is the total $30.59. However, this pattern will get cheaper the more I use it. So that brings us to a grand total of $102.22. For this, which I don't think is too bad of a price for me, especially considering the pattern's reusable. I really like these. These are definitely, I don't know, kind of cool thing that I've sewn recently. That was really easy. As far as labor hours, this took me 5 hours to make. And I always stick this segment in because I like to talk about how long it takes to make clothing. Of course, it is not the same as in a factory setting where you can make them much quicker. However, I think it's time that we start all thinking about the cost of clothing and how it relates to the bad labor practices we see both in America and in other countries. Recently, I was kind of doing some research around LA garment workers and how they were getting paid per completed garment, which then was putting them at like $6 an hour, which is obviously super illegal in LA. It was not that recent, it was in the pandemic, but still super not okay, super illegal. And it's why I want to bring to you the cost. I am still doing the cost today in Seattle, but I think maybe I'll choose LA for my next adjustment of living wage. I believe in a living wage, so if I was to pay myself a living wage in Seattle, it would be $32.70 an hour. So if you multiply that by 5, you get a labor cost total of $163.50, which would bring me to a grand total of $265.72 for me to sell this and be paid fairly for my labor. Of course, once you add in like retail, there's a lot of other overhead costs. You get higher than that to make this. So just think about how much that garment worker making your $20 dress from Shein is making. Likely it is something like 2 cents per garment, which is not good and is not a labor practice that treats anyone fair or well. Anyway, we have finished budget, so now I will move on to talking about the project itself. Here it is. I have worn it all day. It was really, really comfy overall. I will note, which I'll need to do some research on how to adjust for, before. It does give me a bit of a wedgie, or as they call it in the sewing bee, a hungry bum. With that hungry bum, these got a little less comfortable because I did feel like I was having to constantly pull it out. However, I do still think they're really cute, and I'm sure that there's ways I can adjust for that, or honestly, I think if I wear shorts under this, it would be less likely to happen. So we'll see what I figure out to fix this. I also wonder if like tights would make it less bad, but that's like pretty much the only fitting issue from wearing it all day. I did wear it most of the day without the straps crossed just because I was at work and I didn't want to have to uncross them every time I needed to use the bathroom and then recross them and get all the twisted. So I did just to wear it without the cross because I do have to take this all the way off anytime I use the bathroom. On that side, things I could improve next time, I actually think I wouldn't change any way I sewn the fabric. I think the only like little hiccup I had is like I think the transition on the bib from the cats to the stripes is not necessarily the smoothest, but they're also really different thicknesses. So I think that might have contributed. But the other thing I would change is I think next time I make this, I'm going to actually put the zipper on a side seam because I just think it's way easier to work with a side seam when you're wearing a pair of overalls because you do have to take them all the way off every time you use the bathroom. So those are like the only two things I would change. Otherwise, I think I did really well. I think what's really funny, let me turn this inside out. When I first started sewing, I never like understood why you finished seams or why you took pride in that. Now, like the longer I've been sewing and the more I've been washing garments I've sewn, I've understood it. But I have to say, these are really, really clean inside. Like all the seams are really clean. Everything, like these are very washable and I'm really proud of that. And it's just been interesting, definitely reaching the part where I realize, and I would say the inside of my sewing is as beautiful as the outside. I never understood sewers who are like, it's important that your inside is pretty. And I'm like, okay, whatever, it's the inside. No one's gonna know. Don't get me wrong. If your sewing skill set, strongest, whatever, if you don't want to finish your seams, I would never judge you for that. But I will say personally, when I do finish my seams and make this like a more washable and like useful garment for a long time, I feel really, really proud of it and I really enjoy that. So I'm very proud of the inside. I also just can't believe that these only took me 5 hours, and it probably would have been 4.5 if I didn't have to cut that dang pattern at the beginning. So I'm sure these will be even quicker to make in the future. I already can tell you I'm gonna make more pairs of this. Some of my debate is I'm like, how I would kind of like to figure out how to make these in a full length. So I might see if I can pattern hack that at some point because I think it would be really cute. But I do like the culotte length. I think it hits at a good length for me. I think that wraps us up for this project. I hope you enjoyed it. As always, a good way to support me is to buy a coffee over at Ko-Fi. I only make about $25 per video on YouTube, which doesn't even begin to cover my supplies and labor. So I always just really appreciate, and it is a delightful day when I get something over there. Aside from that, you can of course always support me the usual ways by giving this video a thumbs up, commenting down below. Of course, if you're new here, subscribing and sticking around, I would love to have you. I post every single Friday at 8 a.m. Pacific time, and I will see you next time. Bye!